Hello and welcome to the first of our videos that I'm going to make. I'm not going to try to be professional with this. I've tried making these videos in one take and all that sort of thing with no uhs or ands or ums and that sort of thing. And that's not the way I talk, and this is meant to be a record of the way things I know them to be or remember them to be, which doesn't mean they're necessarily factually accurate when I tell you. It's just the way that I remember it. Now, Maggie's asked for me to record the different stories that I've told them throughout the years, so that the current generation that hasn't heard these stories and future generations that will not have the opportunity to hear them straight from the horse's mouth will be able to hear them the way that I tell them. If you're interested in reading some of these stories, you may find some with a little less verbiage at random-thoughts-observations.blogspot.com, and I'll try to put that URL on the bottom of this video if I can figure out how to do that later. I had it figured out at one point in time. I don't remember at this point in time because I'm old and senile. My name is David Eric McClendon Sr., and I'm 53 years old. Today is August the 22nd, 2015. Just yesterday we took the youngest of our children to college out at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and it is a Saturday now. Yesterday was Friday. It is a Saturday now, and it's been a very unusual day around the McClendon family household, primarily because we don't have anybody to walk in the next room and tell about different things or ask about different things or wonder who did what and that type of thing. So it's me and Moogie, which is what we call my wife Suzanne. Moogie, they sometimes call me Gindy. When I was growing up I was called Bird. So it's Moogie and Gindy and Xerxes the cat and two grandpuppies which belong to Laney, Batley and Petra. And they're in another part of the house at this point in time. And you never know, Xerxes might come on the scene here in a little bit. He's right here beside me, but you can't see him right now. I wanted to start out these videos with one that gets asked about a lot, and that's about McClendon Manor. It's on the blog spot, the random-thoughts-observations, or it might be just observation without the S, but I think it's observations, random-thoughts-observations.blogspot.com, is called The House That Built Me. Now, in order to get the general idea of what happened back in 1974, or maybe 1973, but 1974 is when most of this took place. Hey baby, yes, you big boy. No, I'm not talking to myself. The cat's right down here. He's just off screen. You can't see him. Anyway, you want to come up and talk to the people? No? Okay. Well, if you decide to, come on. Anyway, he's a beautiful kitty cat, and anybody that knows me knows that I don't typically fawn over a cat. I've had cats that I kind of liked. There was one named Baby that I kind of liked. That she was a sweet kitty. She went to live with another lady here in town named Miss Georgia. And there was Leica, who was a beautiful kitty cat, beautiful long-haired kitty cat, and he just fell off the roof as far as we could tell. Here's my buddy. You see the people? You can't see them, but they can see you. See, this is Xerxes. This is Xerxes, also known as Zerkmaster Prime, the Zerkmeister, and he's just a beautiful baby. Anyway, we're going to start out telling you about back in 1973, maybe, but definitely into 1974. National Cash Register. My father worked for National Cash Register, which was also known as NCR, or the NCR. He had been a commission salesman. He was the best salesman most years, and the years he wasn't the best salesman, his brother was, and he was second best. He made, National Cash Register has this program called the Counter Points Club, CPC, or at least they did at the time. And to get into this CPC club, you had to be among the best of the best. And Papa Bruce made it all the time. As far as I know, he worked for National Cash Register from just before I was born until 1974. Anyway, what happened with National Cash Register is they decided they had a new CEO that came in. He was Japanese, and he decided that everybody should do it for the company, do the best job for the company, and not for personal gain, because that's the way it's done in Japan. And so, hey baby, yes, you're a pretty boy. He's a pretty boy. Anyway, and so it was decided that they would no longer pay their salesmen on commission, but they give them a salary somewhere in the $20,000 range. Now, Papa Bruce was selling bare minimum $60,000 a year in, making commission at least $60,000 a year every year, without fail. And he just couldn't afford this drastic pay cut. He would be making less than a third of what he'd been making before. Well, so he started looking around at different franchise opportunities. We went up to the Spartanburg County Library. He was the branch manager for National Cash Register in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And we went up to the Spartanburg County Library, where he did a lot of research on different franchises. And he looked into a Tasco, he looked into quite a few others, but he decided Western Auto was the way to go. He talked with a lot of different Western Auto franchise owners, and he decided Western Auto was really the way to go. So that's what he did. And we looked around all South Carolina looking for the town to build a Western Auto in, or to find a building to open a Western Auto in. And we looked at McCall, South Carolina. That was a pretty strong runner in it. McCormick, South Carolina, which wasn't so strong. And then Ivor, South Carolina. Well, he'd had a little bit of knowledge of Ivor, South Carolina beforehand, and he was told by Western Auto that a Western Auto would never really fly in Ivor, South Carolina. In fact, a few years before, a guy had come to town and had actually staked out where he was going to build his building, and he decided not to build his Western Auto in Ivor. He did build him a Western Auto someplace else, but he decided Ivor wasn't the place for it. Anyway, we found a place to build the store. Actually, my father found a place to build the store, and I'll tell about that in another episode. Right now we're talking about the house that built me. Well, we went to Ivor looking for a place to live, and when we got told we were being uprooted from Spartanburg, our schools, our friends and all of that, we were told we were going to have horses and mini bikes and a lot of land and all sorts of things. Well, we never once saw a mini bike. We never once had a horse. None of that. And we were told we were going to live out in the country with a lot of land, and that didn't work out. We drove around town and drove around looking and looking and looking for a house that would be for sale, that would be adequate. And my father pulled up beside Cliff's Refreshment Bar. It was also called Cliff's Restaurant at one point in time, and I don't remember what the name of it was at the time. It was Cliff's, but I don't remember what else. The guy that owned it was named Smiley Powell. And we pulled up, and my father said, "Smiley, you find me a house?" And he said, "Yes, I did." He pointed in the general direction of West Green Street. He said, "There's a big white house up there on the corner. It's for sale. It doesn't have a sale sign in the front, but it's for sale." And he gave my father the phone number of the guy that had it for sale. My father went and called him, and we went and parked in front of the house. A little bit later, the salesman came out, and we're looking at this big two-story house, white with asbestos siding. And over on the, if you're facing the house from West Green Street, to the right of the house, as the person was looking, would be the house's left, but to the right of the house, there was a big yard that was just completely overgrown with bamboo. It was a bamboo forest. There was a lot of underbrush. The house, the yard had not been tended to in years, and this was just a bamboo forest there. The front yard, the actual front part of the yard, was not very deep. There was a wire gate. It was a wire kind of fence, and the fence posts were rotting away. It was just kind of, the fence was in complete, total decay. The house had been a boarding house for many years. The house was built by Preston Brooks Gailey. He was named after a famous South Carolina statesman, and we'll tell you a little bit about that here in a little bit. But it was built by Preston Brooks Gailey, who had been a cotton merchant there in Ivor. He'd buy cotton from the farmers and sell them to different cotton warehouses and that type of thing. And a lot of the transactions took place right there in the yard of this house. But he had passed on many years before, and he had stayed in the family. And they hired a couple to, and I want to say the couple's last name was Warner, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, so the house had been an old boarding house, and if you're facing the house from the front, which is West Green Street, if you're facing the house from the front, there are two entrances. Actually three, but there are two that you can see. There's one that is kind of center of the house, and over to the left of that, as you're facing the house, is another door that at that point in time was sectioned off by a piece of lattice fencing, or lattice work. And that section, that door, was the door that entered into what they had made into an apartment for the caretakers. And then over to the right-hand side of the door was a screen porch, the front door, the regular front door, was a screen porch, and through that screen porch was a double French door to go into what we later called the library. But anyway, we entered through the caretaker's cottage, or caretaker's apartment, and when we first went in, the first room we went into was a sitting room, like a little living room or parlor, and that's what later became my mother's sewing room or parlor, where she'd go and she'd just be off by herself. She had a television in there, a desk for working on. At one point in time, she had her desk there at the house where she did most of her paperwork. Then you go into the next room, which was at that point in time a kitchen for the caretakers, and later that was converted into a dressing room for my parents. And we had a big dresser in there, and an exercise machine, one of these belt things that just shakes your fat loose, supposedly, and a big mirror. And then as you pass through that room, over to your right would be a doorway which led into what became my parents' bedroom, but was the bedroom for the caretakers. And just off of that bedroom, right beside the door that you came through to get into the bedroom, was a door to the bathroom. And this had a big 4-foot, one of those big clawfoot kind of bathtubs in it. That just looked terrible. It was rusty, it was messy, it was green, it had old plumbing to it. The bathroom fixtures were just in terrible, terrible shape. And about the time I passed through from what was the living room into what was the kitchen, I had this extremely strong feeling that's kind of like a somewhat similar to deja vu, but not exactly. I felt some sort of presence. It was really weird. Anyway, going back to the bedroom, if you're standing in the bedroom, there's a doorway which leads out into sort of like a hallway foyer. And to the left, as you're going through that door, would be what we call the pink bathroom. And that pink bathroom had a shower stall, a linen closet, a sink, and this sink was just covered in rust, just absolutely covered in rust, and a potty with pink tile. And the pink tile was one you just couldn't find to replace again if you wanted to, or at least we couldn't. Okay, going out of this bathroom, if you turn to your, if you were standing there in the hallway after you came straight out of the bathroom, if you turn to your left, you go into what became our den, and then as you're in the den, if you look to the right as you're standing in the den, there's the room that we call the library. At that point in time, it was just a plain concrete floor, and it had what they call casement windows, which are those kinds that you roll out, and they just kind of roll out like this and back. And then over to your left, if you're standing in the living room with the library on your right, directly beside that, which was up under the stairs, was a storage closet. And to your left would be the entrance into the kitchen. Well, now you go into the kitchen. At that point in time, the roof was sagging, or the ceiling was sagging. The kitchen kind of bowed in, the floor kind of bowed in. There was a bunch of old metal cabinets. The sink that was rusting, the cabinets were rusty, and it was just in bad shape. You go from the kitchen, if you were standing in the door that you walked into the kitchen, to your left was the back door of the house, and that went out onto a back porch. It was kind of a screened-in porch. We later closed that in. And then there was, off of that, what we call the back porch, was a room where it really had been a covering over an old well. And this covering over the old well was, part of it was falling in. We cut the very end of that off because it was just impossible to salvage that part. And it was kind of screened in and kind of not. Anyway, then directly off that porch, not the back porch, but the back porch was a set of concrete stairs that went out to the backyard. Going back into the house, going back into the kitchen, back into the den or the living room, back into the foyer, which was right outside the bathroom. If you're standing in the foyer with the bathroom, the pink bathroom on your right, now to your left was a set of big French doors. And they were kind of in bad shape. Walking through the French doors, over to your right was a room that had been like a parlor for them at the boarding house. Later it was a bedroom for the boarding house, and we originally turned it into a living room, but later became my brother's bedroom because he was afraid to go upstairs. He was so afraid to go upstairs. After he was allowed to move back downstairs, it was incredibly rare to see him upstairs, and never by himself. Anyway, so directly in front of you then, if you were standing in the foyer facing toward the front of the house, there was a big front door that my mother later painted a stained glass window on. I got a stained glass kit for Christmas, and I was going to stained glass some bottles, and she took the stained glass kit from me, which was typical. She took the stained glass kit from me before I got to even open it, and decided that she was going to stained glass the front window. Why give me a Christmas present if you're going to take it? But that was typical. Anyway, I only was able to complete a few models in my life, and that's because as soon as I got them, I took them and hid them until I could get them put together. Anyway, so you're standing there, you're facing the door, and to your left is a set of stairs. And all along the wall, at this point in time when we were visiting the house, was what they call lath. We sheetrocked it later, or had it sheetrocked, but it was lath. And an old kind of beadboard type of thing on the bottom, of wainscoting, old type of beadboard, but the top part was lath, which kind of resembled beadboard, but not exactly. You go up the stairs, and then when you get to the top of the stairs, it would take a little turn kind of to your left. When you take the turn kind of to your left, the first door to your right would be what was going to be my brother's bedroom. We called it the yellow bedroom because he only stayed there a few nights and then he just refused to sleep there ever again. Then the next door, as you come along, would be the bathroom, which was on the back part of the house. And there was no floor in that bathroom. There was no tub. There was a toilet. The toilet was suspended. A pipe was attached to a beam, and the toilet was there hanging on that pipe attached to that beam. No floor, no sink, no floor, and a huge window, full-length window, went down back behind the toilet. So if you were going to stand and use the toilet, if you could stand and use the toilet because there was no floor, but if you did, if there was a floor, you would be seen by everyone out in the free world. Anyway, coming back out of the bathroom, if you were able to get into the bathroom because there was no floor, you'd see I need to tell you that I'm a very wordy kind of person. Off camera, I'm getting all sorts of mock surprise looks. Actually, one mock surprise look from Suzanne, and the cat would probably give me a mock surprise look if he was even cared what I was saying. Anyway, so coming back out of the bathroom, over on your right would be what became my bedroom. And that bedroom, it had a window that went directly over the back stairs, so you could see directly down to the back stairs. Another window that went out onto the lower roof. The house had two stages of roofs. There was a roof over the porch part of the lower level, and then there was a roof over the main body of the house, which was on top of the second level. Going back out of that room and proceeding down the hallway to the next room, which would be on your right, that was what became my sister's bedroom. And both of its windows opened out onto the roof, one out onto Betsy Street and one out onto West Green Street. Coming back out of her room and to your right would be what we turned into a den. It was a small room. Well, when we saw this house, the whole entire house smelled of what's called bee bran. Now, bee bran is a chemical that's used to kill fleas on dogs and cats and cows and that type of thing. It's used primarily on farms. They had used so much of this bee bran in this house that it was ground into the floor, and floors that were supposed to be sort of a light brown were actually white. So it was ground into the floor, and this white, and you could smell it everywhere. Inside each of the upstairs bedrooms was a 5-gallon bucket. Now, this 5-gallon bucket was what was used as a way of relieving yourself in the middle of the night, what some people call a slop jar. There were several of these. They hadn't been taken out in years. Now, there were no boarders at this point in time. All the boarders had since moved on. But these old slop jars were still there. The walls were covered in spots with 15 to 20 layers of wallpaper, and each layer of wallpaper had been painted several times. The lights hang from the ceiling were kind of just a bare wire coming down to a bare bulb that had a couple of outlets on it, and that was the only outlets in the house, was what was on the base of this bulb. Your bulb would screw into it, it had a little flip switch, your plug would plug into that. That was all the outlets that there were in each room. One bare bulb was all the light that there was. There were no lights in the closet. It was just your typical old, it was like a farmhouse kind of house, but typical old house. Some people called it a mansion. Well, everybody, when we had the house, everybody referred to it at first as the Gailey place, because Preston Brooks Gailey had been the one to have it built. And soon after we bought it, I suggested that we should call it McClendon Manor, and my father liked the name so much he went out and bought a rubber stamp that said McClendon Manor, and then in quotation marks up under it, the Gailey place, and then up under the corner of West Green and Betsy Street, Iowa, South Carolina. Now, back at that point in time in Iowa, the houses did not have street numbers. You didn't get your mail at your house, you got your mail at the post office. You'd go in, you'd either go to the counter for general delivery and say, I'm so-and-so and I'd like my mail. Usually the postmaster would know who you were, and you didn't have to say I'm so-and-so, you'd say I got any mail. Or you had a post office box, which we did have. We had post office box 415, Iowa, South Carolina, 29655. Anyway, getting back to my story, all through the house we kept feeling this kind of presence. And as we started redoing the house, the presence seemed to make itself known a little bit more and a little bit more. Well, let me get back to the day that we were looking at the house, because I just like to change gears, because it's fun to play yo-yo with your emotions or whatever. Anyway, we went outside, out through the front door, and my father told the guy, we'll take it. And the guy said, okay. And he was told that the price was $12,000. My father got a checkbook, laid the checkbook, one of those big business kind of checkbooks, laid the checkbook on the back of the car. It was a 1967 Cadillac Callus. It was a Callus sedan. Anyway, light yellow. And he started writing the check for $12,000, and my sister started crying. She just cried and cried and cried. She could not believe that we were going to actually live in this house. Now, up until that point in time, all the houses we lived in had been immaculate, beautiful, brand new. As far as she knew, as far as I knew, all the houses we moved into had been brand new, built just for us, or had been built and we moved in. We were the original owners, and didn't have any work to do to move in. Well, this one was going to be different. And she cried, and she cried, and she cried all the way home. Well, anyway, along the way, we had this house now down in Iowa. We didn't move down to Iowa just yet because the store hadn't been built. My father was still taking care of things in Spartanburg, still working with National Cash Register. The store was supposed to open about May. So along about April, things started showing up. While there had been some delays about building the store, the ground hadn't even been completely broken for the store when things started showing up. She'd get a call from a truck driver, I'm here in Iowa, what do you want me to do? And she just had to decide what to do. So we drove down to Iowa, my sister, my brother, my mother and I, we drove down to Iowa and unloaded all this transfer truck into that house. The first transfer truck load was of shelving units. It had shelves and shelves. We had 4-foot length shelves for the store. And this is important. If you've ever dealt with shelves, you know that the 4-foot ones are fairly heavy. The 5-foot ones are extremely heavy. 3-foot ones are kind of heavy, but not quite as heavy as all of that. Anyway, they're 4-foot shelves, and they had, for the wall units, they had these wall braces that were shaped like an L, because the back of it would go up to the wall and you bolt it to the wall. And then the aisle bracelet brackets were shaped like a T, because it would come down, the shelf would mount on either side, come down, and then the base of it would be like a T. Well, we didn't know what we were unloading. We just knew we were unloading L's and T's. So my sister, my mother, and I unloaded this truck. My brother, who was about 5, almost 6 years old, no, 6 years old, because he was in 1st grade at the time, so 6 years old. We unloaded this truck, and he stood there and watched, got in the way most of the time. And we unloaded and we unloaded and we unloaded it. It seemed like forever, but we had an entire truckload of shelving units. A few days later, we got another call that we had a truckload of merchandise. There were TVs, stereos. This was before VCRs were invented for the home. The TVs, stereos, several types of furniture, washers and dryers, and countless tires, cases of oil, all types of things like that. My mother, my sister, and I unloaded this truckload of things. And to this day, I love the smell of a brand new tire. The reason being is because for the first few months of our life there in Iowa, we smelled these new tires, because our house was literally filled with tires. Well, to make a short story long, this is what usually happens with me. My father sold stuff out of the house before the store was even open. People would come in, they'd come and they'd say, "What you sell? What you going to build here?" "Oh, I'm having going to build a Western Auto store." "You going to sell those good Western Auto TVs?" "Yeah." And he'd bring them down to the house and he'd show them a TV, and he sold stuff out of the house. And throughout the years, the house took on sort of a personality of its own. We actually did countless hours of work there in the house. My sister and I hauled buckets of water upstairs while my mom scrubbed the floor. Buckets of water, buckets of water, buckets of water. There was a point in time while they were replumbing the house, we didn't have plumbing in the house, no water whatsoever. And the little lady that lived down the hill from us at the corner of West Poplar Street and Betsy, her name was Miss Jane, and I think her last name was Milford. I know her nephew's name was Everett Milford, and he owned the house. She lived with him. Anyway, they let us use their hose to fill up the buckets. So we'd go down the hill, fill up these 5-gallon buckets with water, my sister and I, fill up these buckets with water, take them to the top of the steps, through the house, up the stairs to the top floor, scrub. My mom would do the scrubbing, so about the time we'd get there with one bucket of water, she had another bucket of dirty water for us to take back out. And we just did that constantly for weeks, because it took a lot of scrubbing to get all that bee bran out of the floor. Anyway, along the way, they unstuck some of the windows. Some of the windows had been painted shut, and there would be times you'd see the windows raise and lower, and raise and lower. Now, this is weird. Now the windows, people would say, well, they're counterbalanced windows. They had weights to counterbalance them. Well, a counterbalanced window will raise or lower from time to time till it reaches its equal weight, but it won't constantly do this. But the ones that we had unstuck would raise and lower. Once we had light switches installed in the house, you could actually see the switch flip. The light would come on, the light would go off. The light would come on, the light would go off. And when this happened, you'd feel this.
Then other weird things started happening. My mom would put rolls of toilet paper at the bottom of the stairs for my sister and I to take upstairs. When we went upstairs, rather than my mom having to climb the stairs just to take toilet paper up, she put other things, towels and that type of thing. When we went by, if we see things at the bottom of the stairs, we know we were supposed to take them upstairs and put them away. Well, my sister was upstairs one time. My mother put some stuff at the bottom of the stairs, and she hollered up to Sandra, telling her next time she went upstairs to take them with her. And a little bit later, the toilet paper comes flying up the stairs. Nobody's in the house except for my mother and my sister. My mother's not going to throw a roll of toilet paper up the top of the stairs, and my sister couldn't have because she was upstairs. But my sister swears this happened, and I believe her because she's not apt to lie about something like that. Anyway, but other things like that would happen. Something would be downstairs that was supposed to be upstairs, and later would end up upstairs. It seems like the presence that was in the house liked to be upstairs. And when we first got the upstairs straightened out, there wasn't any carpeting. My mom had painted the floors throughout the house a cocoa brown was what it was called. It was a floor paint called cocoa brown. The old wood wasn't the pretty kind of hardwood. It was just hardwood, like it wasn't meant to be pretty flooring. It was meant to be functional. Anyway, so she painted everything cocoa brown, and you could hear, now old houses creak. There's no question about that, old houses creak, but they don't generally creak in a pattern. You would hear creaking that would start out from the top of the stairs, would go to my sister's room, go in the room, creak coming out of the room, creak going down the hall, creak going into my room, creak coming out of the room. And when my brother was had been living in his room upstairs, you could hear creak into his room and come back out. But after he moved downstairs, the creaking stopped going into his room. Anyway, we put the carpet down and that kind of muffled it somewhat. You could still hear it from time to time, but it muffled it somewhat. Anyway, there would be times where you would feel this presence. A lot of times I would be doing my homework and I'd feel this presence. And we decided to name the ghost Press. Figured we had a ghost. We decided to name this ghost Press, as for Preston Brooks Gaelic. Anyway, there'd be times I'd be doing my homework and feel like somebody was watching me, and so I just started explaining. I'm doing my math homework, or I'm working on this history report, or what have you. I would sit and read a book in my room, and I would feel this presence, and I would just tell it what I was reading. And we determined that if there was a ghost, and I'm not saying it was haunted, I'm not saying it wasn't, but we determined that if it was a ghost, that it liked what we were doing. And it seemed to be that whatever this presence was, if it liked you, it liked you, and if it didn't, it played tricks on you. A lot of tricks on you. Everything seemed to go fine. And there would be times, though, that like I'd be looking for something. One time it was my math book. And I looked all over, everywhere I could think of. What have I done with my math book? I've got to have it. I've got to get my math homework done. And I announced out loud, well, I can't find my math book. I guess I'll go down to the kitchen and maybe I'll remember where it was. And a little while later, after getting a snack, I came back up, and there it was, right dead center of my bed. Now, we were always, when we were growing up, we had to keep our beds made. Our rooms had to be immaculate. There was no mess in our house. No clothes on the floor, no trash in the floor, no stuff piled up on the bed. You made your bed, you kept it neat. That's just the way it was. There was no question about, well, what if I don't? We knew what would happen if we didn't. So our rooms were always neat. Our bed was always made. The floors were always clear. There was no time when it wasn't. So it wasn't like, the stuff had just gotten covered up with stuff or whatever. This math book would have been seen if it had been on the middle of the bed. Well, here it was, dead center, as close to the center of the bed as you could possibly get. There was my math book. And that happened a lot of the time. You get looking for something, you couldn't find it, you'd announce, I can't find so-and-so, I need to find such and such. And later on you'd come back and there it'd be. It was really weird. You got the feeling, though, that this entity, this presence, this ghost, whatever, liked the family and liked what we had done. And we had people come to the house that say, hey, I used to live here. I'd like to see what you've done with the house. And we'd usually take them on a tour of the house and show them this and this and this. And most of the people liked it, and people would tell us about the different things. But when we first moved to town, as we were starting to deal with cleaning the house, a lot of people told us ghost stories. And all old houses have ghost stories. One was that a person had hung himself in the room that became my sister's bedroom, had hung himself in the closet. And it's interesting that they chose that closet because that was the only one that did not have a ceiling to it. And that was where the access panel was to get up into the attic for doing rewiring and stuff. So that one didn't have a ceiling in it, so naturally that's the spookiest one for there to be, somebody had hung themselves in. Anyway, but through the years we got this feeling that there was this presence there. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about something that happened along the way. As I told you, a lot of people were deathly afraid to be upstairs, go upstairs, be upstairs by themselves. They were just deathly afraid. They felt this presence when they went up. My sister could deal with it. My brother could not. I could deal with it very, very well. As a matter of fact, I actually enjoyed it. Some people would go up there and they'd feel this uneasiness, and there was an uneasiness at times. One time, my wife, became my wife later, Suzanne was upstairs by herself, and she got this feeling, and she beat him up and down the stairs, went to go and be with my mother, because my mother and her were the only two in the house. Anyway, but my Uncle Carl was about as spooked as you can get. And my father, he was a spooked kind of person as well. He would get very afraid of dead people, very afraid of ghosts and that type of thing. My uncle was, he would stay when he came on the weekends to work at the store. He'd come home Friday, he'd stay Friday night in the upstairs, what we called the yellow bedroom. It was the guest room, but we called it the yellow bedroom. Carl would stay in that room Friday night and go home Saturday night and go back down to Atlanta because the store wasn't open on Sunday. Anyway, Carl was very apprehensive about being upstairs, and he would not be upstairs by himself alone. Well, I don't know how you can be by yourself with someone else, but that's beside the point. But Carl would not be upstairs alone. If I were upstairs, for the most part, no problem. Well, it was after my sister had gone off to college, and I love to play with doing kind of technical things, making model things and that sort of stuff. And what I did was I took a camera tripod. Oh, wait a minute, let's edit that. The first time, I took some clothes and I stuffed them with other clothes. And I had this old man mask. It looked like an old man, long gray hair, and it just kind of looked freaky, but it looked like an old man. I took that and I stuffed the mask with stuff. I took some clothes and I stuffed it with other clothes. And I took some screw eyes and drove them into the ceiling, little teeny tiny screw eyes you could just barely see. And I took some string fishing line. Now, string fishing line was next to impossible to see. I don't know if they still make it, but this was next to impossible to see. It was so clear that, the idea was that the fish couldn't see it, so they wouldn't know that there was anything going on, but it was so clear you couldn't see it. I took the string fishing line and I tied it to the hand of this thing that I made. I put gloves on it, tied it to this hand. I named that thing Uncle Herman, by the way. And this story is built into the thing about the house that built me. It's also separate on the random-thoughts-observations.blogspot.com. But anyway, I tied the string to one of the hands. I ran it through these screw eyes and down to the doorknob in such a way that when the door opened into the room, but in such a way that when the door opened, it pulled on this to raise the hand up. Anyway, I went across the hall. My room was across the hall from here, and waited for Uncle Carl to come home. Uncle Carl comes home, takes his suitcase up to the top of the stairs, goes in to open the door. There's this thing that raises his hand up about the time he opens the door. And Carl throws his suitcase. From the top of the stairs, he throws his suitcase. And he beats that suitcase to the bottom of the stairs. And he's down at the bottom of the stairs. He's pulling at the back of his britches, hollering, "Bruce, Bruce, Bruce." And I come out of my room, and I'm just rolling laughing. And my parents come out from downstairs. They're trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Here Carl is at the bottom of the stairs, clothes everywhere from where he'd thrown the suitcase down to the bottom of the stairs, pulling at the back of his britches, screaming my father's name. And I'm laughing my head off. And I told them what I'd done. They came upstairs to see what I'd done, and they thought it was completely hilarious. Well, the next week, Carl comes upstairs, and he's very apprehensive, because here I am, I'm upstairs, because he's going to not go upstairs until I go upstairs. He's very apprehensive, because he eases the door open, nothing. He eases nothing. So he feels fine. And I'm not sure whether it was the very next week or several weeks later, but I gave it time for him to get back into his comfort zone about not being afraid of Uncle Herman being there. This time, I decided that I was going to do something a little bit different. So I took a camera tripod, like what you can't see it here, but a camera tripod. You know, obviously a tripod by definition is 3 feet, 3 legs. Well, I took a pair of jeans and put the legs inside this pair of jeans. And now this was an old tripod, so you know it didn't have to be spread all the way out for this to work. I put the mask on top of the tripod head, and I made the arms and stuff, and I had some bracing. I don't remember what I used to brace it, but I had some bracing so that when you opened the door you saw these arms. But again, I tied the string through the fish line through the screw eyes down to the hand. And I had found some bloodshot eyes, some plastic bloodshot eyes. We sold these little novelty kind of eye things at the store. I don't know what people would actually do with these things, because they were cheap little rigid plastic, and if you stuck them in your own eyes it would hurt like all get out. But anyway, hey little buddy. Anyway, so I put these eyes in the sockets of this thing, and Uncle Herman was sitting there with this great big old smile on his face. Carl opened the door, and that thing, he opened it, and the way he opened it, the hand just kind of jumped. And Uncle Herman kind of pulled forward just a little bit. Didn't fall, but pulled forward a little bit. And Carl goes screaming to the bottom of the stairs again, and he slept in the downstairs living room that night on the couch. Anyway, my father told me not to do that anymore to Uncle Carl, because Carl's heart probably couldn't stand it. But it was funny. It was a lot of fun, just playing on people being spooky. The house would make a great spook house, because a lot of people were apprehensive about big houses. Upstairs, especially in a big house, that always has that spooky kind of feel. But this house, it really had a spooky kind of presence to it. Now, whether it actually is or actually isn't, I couldn't tell you. I really feel like it is. I really feel like the house has Preston Brooks Gailey or someone there. Whether it's press or not, I don't know. But I felt like this person really, really enjoyed us being there. And I've been in other houses where you felt like the presence was very bad. We had a house over on B Street. We rented a house on B Street, and there was a very negative presence in the front living room. And the house that Suzanne and I lived at the bottom of the hill, where Everett and Miss Jane lived, my father bought that house later. And Everett and Miss Jane let us, while our plumbing was messed up, being redone, they let us take a bath in their bathroom. And this bathroom later became a walk-in closet, because Everett built a new bathroom on the side of the house. Anyway, so when my father bought it, that was what had been a bathroom. The bathroom that we all bathed in was now a closet, and there was a very negative feeling in that closet. You go in and you go, ugh. And I knew that, there really couldn't be anything because, as far as I knew, Everett had owned the house for as long as I'd known. I'm not sure whether Miss Jane and her husband had owned it before or exactly what, but Everett was still alive at the time, so I knew he didn't die. Miss Jane died while she was living at this house. She fell and broke her hip. She went to the hospital and died. And I can't believe Miss Jane was the kind of person that was just as sweet as she could be. Just you couldn't find any kind of negative vibes about her or whatever. So I can't believe for her that she would be the thing making a negative presence unless something really bad had happened to her. Which I knew that she hadn't died in that house. I knew that, she just fell and broke her leg, broke her hip, or broke her hip and fell, whichever the case may be. But anyway, there was a time when we made that room that was the bedroom there where her, where that closet was, we made that bedroom the nursery. And there was a time my wife walked through there and there was like a mist hovering over the baby bed. It was really weird, but my wife got the feeling that this was a very sweet presence over the baby bed, and that had to be Miss Jane, because Miss Jane was a very sweet person, so she had a very sweet presence. So I really feel that that was her. But if you go into the closet, you go into that closet, you get a very scary kind of feeling. And there was a ceramic kind of light fixture, and I don't know if you know anything about ceramic light fixtures, but it's just a piece of ceramic that mounts up to the ceiling, and there's bulb screws into it. Well, the one that was in that closet was damaged, was busted, didn't work, and I brought one home from the store, and I was going to replace it. Well, when we went to move in the house, I had two friends. One was an electronics engineer working for AT&T. The other was an electrical technician, electronics technician, working for Colonial Pipeline. Now the two of them decided that, okay, they wanted to do something for me in my new house. And that was the only electrical project that I had. There just were no other electrical projects in my house. And so they decided that they'd go ahead and replace that ceramic fixture for me. So the two of them go into the closet, and after a minute or two, I hear, "What?" And then I thought you turned it off. Well, it just goes to show you that you can have all the knowledge in the world. Both of these guys are incredibly intelligent when it comes to electricity. Not necessarily anything else, but when it comes to electricity, when it comes to electronics, they're both very intelligent people. The one, when he was trying to show me how to do some electrical projects, kept grabbing the wrong end of the soldering iron. They didn't say he was intelligent on anything other than electrical work. Still, between the two of them, because both of them trusted that the other had done what was supposed to be done as far as turning off the breaker, neither one of them turned it off. And they did manage to get it replaced, and they didn't burn the house down. The house is no longer there, but it's not through any fault of theirs. Anyway, but I just wanted to tell everybody the story of McClendon Manor, and slip Uncle Herman in there with Carl, and hopefully have a few more entertaining stories than this. I wanted to try to introduce you to our family because I don't know who all will remember these stories. My sister will remember them differently. I really haven't talked with my brother about how he remembers these stories. And none of us is any more right than the other one. But stories get remembered differently, and they change in the telling. So, like I said before in the beginning, these aren't 100% factually accurate, but they are as accurate as I can remember.